not really have any way to take advantage of turns just being stalled out, but actually loses a little bit of health from the burn. Getting a free substitute off so you can actually swing again once Trick Room expires is pretty devastating. I think it's a nice little tech. It felt really strong to me, and looks like it's working so far in this tournament.
Yeah, Jeremy also coming into this tournament with a lot of momentum, having Day 2 Worlds in Honolulu, but we're going to be starting things off with the Incineroar lead. Okay, that's one thing that you can count on in VGC, alongside a Porygon 2 for Jeremy, but Meowscarada and Blaze Breed Tauros on the field for Vijay.
Yeah, 3 Pokemon you probably weren't expecting to see. In the last format we saw the white herb on this Tauros, different, like a herb-based item than we typically see. Often the mirror herb on Tauros, instead the throwback white herb.
Yeah, and that will allow this Tauros to not have the stat drop from that Intimidate stick, but at the same time, what is it going to do in this position?
Well, it's 2 Pokemon that don't want to be hit by close combat, so I'd say not such a bad spot to be. And while this Meowscarada has been intimidated, it does have some interesting options. It could try to knock off this Eviolite. It could flee the battle. It could have gone for a flower trick, but I think that's very unlikely at this point. It's
Sylveon that takes the field for the Meowscarada. So Vijay was known for running Meowscarada and a Tinkaton fairy type, so they sort of have that synergy going, not really as much. We do get the Trick Room from the Porygon 2, though, as I believe we saw Fake Out go into the Tauros.
Yeah, so everything is expected. The close combat now looking a little further away, where even though both of these Pokemon are weak against it, Incineroar probably pretty likely to flee battle here, and even Porygon 2, going to survive a close combat at this point. So Incineroar getting out.
I am curious, though, how this switch is going to work out for Jeremy. It is a Moongus, so having access to redirection with Rage Powder will be huge against this Tauros if it is able to attack, as that Terra Blast brings it down into the yellow. Hyper Voice followed up with a close combat. Porygon 2 is able to hold on.
It makes it a little tricky here, unlike the Aqua Breed Tauros, so no priority move for this Tauros, so that you'd assume if that was an option, Amoonguss would be happily redirecting it.
Oh, for sure.
And yeah, it's a difficult Pokemon to see now, where Amoonguss can be the slowest Pokemon on the field. Everything that we've seen so far on the other side of the field really doesn't want to play against Amoonguss, so a Pokemon that could be very pivotal in this matchup.
Vijay really has to struggle against this Trick Room because of that lack of priority at this point in time. And even if the Meowscarada comes back out onto the field, either through a KO or a switch, Sucker Punch just isn't going to work out at the end of the day, I think, to out-damage Jeremy at this point in time. Yes, Porygon 2 is on its last legs.
There's a priority.
I was going to say, that's a priority attack from Sylveon. Pixelate making that normal type attack a fairy type attack, will pick up that KO, will be put to sleep thanks to Spore due to
Sylveon
trouble.
sleeping, Tauros is still going to get to move.
I was going to say, that Tauros, it's a fire type Pokemon, and if there's one thing Amoonguss cannot take is the heat from a Flare Blitz.
Well, we see 2 very popular Pokemon just get absolutely obliterated there, and hey, Tauros, known as a pretty frail Pokemon there, but after getting absolutely chunked by that Terra Blast, still able to slightly survive the recoil from its own Flare Blades, and that could be a big deal here. I know they could, do its part to help try to stall out this Trick Room with a Protect here, but if able to come back in later once Trick Room expires, neither of these Pokemon are going to be real excited by getting hit by yet another close combat.
No, Jeremy does still have Terastallization on their side of the field, and I think that Ursaluna almost has to Terastallize at this point if you're worried about the grass type attacks from the Meowscarada, but its Terra type is Ghost, so it's going to be taking super effective damage from those dark type attacks. So as long as Vijay is able to find a way through these next Trick Room turns, I think that Meowscarada is going to be so happy to make an appearance.
So no Protect, maybe just calling a substitute and knowing that it's a little bit slower. I'll have to see what Incineroar does. If he doesn't knock out the Tauros, this could be terrible.
Knockoff will knock out that Tauros. That is correct.
Yeah, got him. 4 HP is a whole lot, but able to pick up the knockout. And we kind of see the power substitute here. And not really a need to knock this Sylveon out yet. Instead, a position where against all these powerful Pokemon, wanting to make sure that if Trick Room does expire, still in a position to get some work done.
Scyther, holding Eviolite, will be taking the field next, and I do think this is our opportunity to talk a bit about this Scyther, as it has the Technician ability, which will be boosting the power of Thief and Dual Wing Beat, will not be boosting the power of Close Combat, which is its final move. And I have to wonder here if Vijay knows his damage calculations of Close Combat versus Incineroar. take the opportunity to protect this turn, not wanting to lose that Scyther to a potential Facade and Flare Blitz double up. But still, what a unique Pokemon pick to bring into this tournament.
Yeah, kind of not such a bad Pokemon to have here right now. Like, I'm not super familiar with my Cypher defensive stat calcs, but you'd think that with the Eviolite there, probably can take a single Facade. Twisted Dimension's returning to normal now, and now you're kind of interesting spot where Sylveon's got to be pretty close to waking up. Incineroar now having to face down a Scyther that could hit it super effectively, kind of flipping what we expect from the type chart. Or, maybe that dual wing beat, focusing down the Ursaluna as the real threat here is an option too, although with Meowscarada as the final Pokemon in the back, these two Pokemon are going to need to do at least most of the work getting rid of Incineroar, and Scyther's coming in. Oh, that's a lot of damage.
That's a lot of damage. Not quite the knockout, but that Incineroar is at such low health. It's possible that Sylveon's Hyper Voice, with that Fairy Feather still intact, would be enough to pick up that damage, or maybe just some recoil. We see Flare Blitz get the one-hit knockout on Scyther, despite the Eviolite, but that'll actually take the Incineroar off the board.
And Sylveon's been sleeping for a long time.
It has. It will take this opportunity to wake up, which will break. Actually just will do damage through that substitute because it is a sound-based move, and Facade will return the knockout there.
Oh, this is so weird.
It's so weird,
that was
right?
really, really bad for Vijay there, where I think breaking the substitute would have probably just ended the game because then Meowscarada gets to come in, fire off a super effective attack. Instead with that I guess it doesn't matter, never mind. But I was going to say with the substitute till there, this would be a big deal except for Focus Sash is an item that exists. So instead, we'll safely get to swing twice, although there's not really any reason not to weave protect here and get the burn damage as well, but should be a pretty clean victory here thanks to the heroics of Tauros and Scyther in game one.
What a crazy game. It will take a couple of turns for this to resolve, as Meowscarada, I think quite smartly, protecting itself this turn, has it available, will preserve that Focus Sash for another turn, ensuring that the game will last for another 3 turns. And as we can see from that burn damage, that should be plenty of time to pick up that KO. But Vijay ending this game with a little bit of style. This will be, I think, our first Stellar Terastallization on stream of the season. And it's very beautiful, it's very sparkly, and will certainly do enough damage to break the substitute on that Ursaluna. Finally.
This substitute is hosed.
It really is. I want to take a moment, though, to talk about Vijay's game plan going into this game one, as I'll be honest with you, I was a little bit skeptical about the Scyther, but seeing it do enough damage to ensure that Flare Blitz is a KO in return for the trade, I feel like that was something he had to have calced for, right?
Yeah, I mean, unlike Jeremy, likely very important to his plan with Scyther and the team, and it's kind of interesting where, you don't see a lot of non-fighting type Pokemon with powerful fighting type attacks. Scyther not too many people's team builder. Congratulations on that very impressive game one win. And yeah, I mean, all of a sudden, we're in an interesting spot here. I thought critically too, we didn't really get to learn too much about how well Scyther would have taken those attacks, because by the time it got hit, it had already lowered its defense by using close combat. So, Jeremy doesn't know for sure here. Would Facade have knocked out a healthy Scyther? Would Flare Blitz have knocked out a healthy Scyther? Maybe not. Still some questions as we enter game two, and this team surprises continue to exist on top of the fact that, the 2 Pokemon we didn't see were Snorlax and Primarina. I don't think they're in any way unpickable in this matchup, so I don't know if I'm feeling super good about this one if I'm Jeremy, where he's been so good in Swiss at so many tournaments, but this is a tough matchup.
I was gonna say, talk about Pokemon that I anticipated on seeing in game number 1 from Vijay. I mean, Snorlax is right on top of the list. You have no way to stop Trick Room other than stalling it out and removing Porygon 2 early enough in the game that it can't come back.
So I think what we just saw in the replay, to me, is the key turn of that game. Mungus choosing to put Sylveon to sleep with that Spore instead of redirecting attacks away, gives up the Porygon kind of for free, and then winds up going down pretty easily itself anyway. I think that was just kind of a miscalculation where perhaps Jeremy also forgot about the quick attack, because I think that was just a devastating turn against.
Yeah, their approach to this game, I think, was correct. You set up Trick Room, you know that your opponent doesn't have any access to Speed Control or any way to stop it other than those KOs, and then you hope that you find enough damage to basically end the game before Trick Room expires. But unfortunately for Jeremy, this just didn't really play out for them, and Vijay was able to find this end game where it's 1v1, essentially Focus Sash versus Ursaluna, and unfortunately for Ursaluna, it was on a timer and ended up losing to its own burn.
Yeah, I think the one positive thing I would say on Jeremy's side of the field is that Game 1 is much more difficult to play when you're in a team that's kind of this unexpected when you're on the other side of the field. Where, while Jeremy's team is a little bit of a swap from what we're used to seeing with that Flamigo appearing in the Tyranitar slot, generally it's something that Vijay could have prepared for, where no one's preparing for this. So at least okay, well, there's still a lot of options, and like maybe there wasn't like the greatest information gathering game 1 ever. You have some idea for how he approached the matchup, which allows Jeremy to then turn around like, okay, well, I give a little bit better idea of what I might need to do. Perhaps I underestimated the Tauros a little bit, where the Whiter actually was like super huge in that.
Yeah, it was.
Because that damage really mattered. The quick attack from Sylveon, usually a little bit underwhelming, but was absolutely critical in that matchup. So, Man, I can't believe we're watching this.
I'm honestly surprised in the best way possible. Like, we spent so much time, I think, talking about creativity, both coming into this tournament and obviously in earlier segments in this tournament. Vijay is the embodiment of creativity right now. When you have a format where you know that there's going to be some unique things, you have these Pokemon that you've been playing with time and time and time again, and you have that experience, you can find these opportunities for these Pokemon to shine. And as we see a repeat here of the Tauros and the Sylveon and the Porygon 2 and the Incineroar, I think Vijay is in the driving seat once again.
Actually, a slightly better position than last game was Sylveon coming out instead of the Meowscarada. Last time that was a turn 1 switch, so can't fake up both Pokemon, right? You're going to get that Hyper Voice off a turn faster, or a close combat's going to come out here and chuck one of these 2 Pokemon. And hey, maybe Blaze Breed Tauros a little underrated. I thought its water type cousin was pretty impressive as well. But Tauros seems like it does well in these formats where the average stats are just a little bit lower.
I gotta say, I think Dwee's having a field day right now, given that Tauros is absolutely driving this match forward. The one thing I want to point attention to as well here as we go into this turn number 1, I think looking at which Pokemon Vijay targets in terms of who do you close combat will give us a good indication of who's in the back, because if it is going to be the Snorlax finally making an appearance in this game too, I think you're okay with Trick Room going up. Jeremy isn't going to go for it just yet, as they will be switching out the Porygon 2 immediately for that Amoonguss. Certainly could take a close combat, but that's not the target. It's Incineroar, and that's a one-hit KO.
Vijay is red hot, just absolutely calling that one. Useless switch. Not going to have Incineroar for the rest of the game. No fake out coming out. So Sylveon also going to be able to dish out some damage. Hey, it's not a whole lot, but if you don't give anything up for it and remove an entire Pokemon, a very problematic Pokemon, I might add, as there are several Pokemon on this team who really do not want to be intimidated. This is a pretty scary spot now where could we be seeing this crazy team going to 5-0?
I think it's very likely. The Flare Blitz into that Amoonguss feels like a very safe play, especially when you consider this Amoonguss is running both Pollen Puff and Clear Smog. The only way it can avoid damage would be to switch back into Jeremy's party, which is what we see, but they're sending in that Ursaluna. It might be able to take 1 attack here, but can it take 2?
Oh, wow.
Okay, it actually might be able to take 2, but still, it's going to be on the same timer we saw in game number 1, where that burn is going to come in and pick up that knockout very quickly if Quick Attack doesn't beat it to it.
That's what I'm going to say. That's terrible, right? Where it's almost worse than it survived. We're very close to being knocked out by this burn. There's like not a whole lot of obvious counterplay to a Quick Attack into that slot, and then Vijay can kind of just make a read on what he thinks is going to be the other slot. You either close combat if you're expecting Porygon, or go for the Fire type attack if you're expecting Amoonguss. And what Jeremy really needs is to find some way to get Amoonguss in next to Ursaluna and Pollen Puff, but I just know how you do that when it's weakened so much. But he is going to go for it, or they are going to go for it.
Yeah, they are going to go for it, but at what cost? The nice thing here is that Amoonguss will return to the field at full health thanks to the Regenerator ability, so that can sort of open the door here. We'll probably take a little bit of chip damage here on the switch, assuming the Tauros targets down that slot, which, given the quick attack into that Ursaluna, that's exactly not what we see, as Vijay probably predicting that the Ursaluna would switch out there and going for the Flare Blitz there instead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty reasonable play. So now you're in an awkward position where, Amoonguss needs to use both Rage Powder and Pollen Puff in this turn.
Yeah.
That is not a thing. So now I think you probably have to switch Ursaluna back out for Porygon and try to get some situation later where Amoonguss is free to Pollen Puff, a switching in Ursaluna. It's dicey. It's real dicey.
It is real dicey out there. I love, though, just to see how Jeremy is keeping their composure in this matchup. I feel like a lot of times when you're playing a matchup like this, where there's no way you could have anticipated, you're learning as you go. It's very easy to get lost in the heat of the moment, but they are keeping their cool.
There's a chance.
There's a chance here.
This is a very exploitable turn. I'm surprised to see this.
We knew going into this turn that there was going to be a double protect here from Vijay, protecting both the Pokemon from damage. Facade going into that first protect. Pollen Puff making the correct call. Will be able to heal up that Ursaluna. Looking a little bit more comfortable on the field for Jeremy now.
Yeah, I just don't understand that play. There's no reason to give this up for free now. There's really no counterplay to it. Well, yeah, I mean, you could go for a second Pollen probably and just target the Tauros slot. Likely to pick up a knockout that way. Suddenly you wind up with 3 pretty healthy Pokemon again. And there's a real chance that Jeremy can pull this one back. It's been such a great start to this game, but letting the foot off the gas maybe at just the wrong moment.
It's a tough call to make because at the end of the day, you definitely have to watch out for Trick Room. You have to watch out for the fact that both these Pokemon could be put to sleep by Spore. And with Porygon 2 in the back as well, there certainly is still a lot of damage potential for Jeremy. But I think Vijay just unfortunately taking a step off the gas, like you mentioned, will be bringing that momentum back further as Meowscarada will switch out onto the field. Tauros will be KO'd by the Facade. Finally landing. At least the Meowscarada won't be put to sleep.
Yeah, I mean, nice switch there where does predict the Spore, so the Pollen Puff gets it right. So Ursula not quite as healthy as it could be, and Meowscarada now going to the option of hopefully surviving long enough to be on the field as the Trick Room expires, and then able to ignore this Rage Powder and start causing problems for whatever Pokemon is alongside Amoonguss when that occurs.
Scyther, without the threat of the Incineroar on the opposing side of the field anymore, feels a little bit more comfortable. We still have to wait for the end of Trick Room here.
Yeah, so this is another scary double protect, right? Where there's no nothing to stop the option of another Pollen Puff, and there's also the chance for a substitute, although a little risky perhaps at this point with how low the health on the Ursaluna is.
I feel like you just go for another Pollen Puff. I mean, you made that call earlier on in the game. You could try and make it again. Okay, here we go. Substitute will protect the Ursaluna from any priority attacks. And here's a fun fact for you. Pollen Puff into Substitute will still work. So actually, that was a very great play. Jeremy is able to have their cake and eat it too, as even though Trick Room has now expired, that Ursaluna has the Substitute up and also has the protection of the Amoonguss alongside of it.
Yeah, this Ursaluna was once so weakened that it was a single attack away from, or a single turn away from feigning to a burn. Now, very healthy, has a substitute up. This is the risk of just double protecting your way through Trick Room, right? Where if your opponent's in wave taking advantage of it, as we mentioned in the pregame, not Earthquake there, instead substitute. And now, Jeremy's put themselves in just such a nice position where this game just felt so over. This is why you don't lock in the forfeit when you still have a way out.
You do never give up until the final Pokemon makes its move, sings. I'm going to work on that. For now, knockoff into the Amoonguss will get rid of its items, but Dual Wing Beat will be doing enough damage to pick up the KO there. That is boosted by that Technician ability, so going to do a good chunk of damage, possibly even get that knockout without the additional chip from knockoff, assuming there is no berry in play, of course. Facade coming through will connect with that Scyther. No Eviolite in play there, as that is yet again a one-hit KO on that Pokemon.
Yeah, it's big too. I think if Scyther had survived that, it kind of looked over.
Yeah.
But now I think it really is probably slightly Jeremy favored. There's no longer a great way to stop this Trick Room. There's the awkwardness of Hyper Voice going through Substitute here, and there's still the Focus Sash on the Meowscarada, but there's a real way now you can kind of imagine maybe Porygon 2 could finish this one.
Yeah.
Because suddenly that Meowscarada needs to do a lot before it faints, right? You want to knock off this Eviolite. You'd like to get another swing on the Ursaluna. Will Vijay be able to do everything fast enough, or is Jeremy going to claw this one back?
I almost feel like Trick Room is a trap here for Jeremy, as they might not have time to reset it, and you just want to go for as much damage as possible. But that's certainly a pace that Vijay is going to be matching with that Terra Stellar Terastallization to boost knockoff into Porygon 2. We'll be removing the Eviolite, like you just mentioned, Scott. Hyper Voice going to follow up with the 1-2 punch, and it is enough to pick up the KO on Porygon 2. So even though there is a substitute present on the field for Ursaluna, and even though the Facade will be picking up that KO on Sylveon, we are once again in an end game where Meowscarada, Focus Sash intact, just has to wait 2 more turns for that burn to pick up the KO.
Yeah, wow, I mean, it was so close, right? I think if Porygon 2 is able to survive that Hyper Voice, we have a different winner of this game too. But I don't think there's any way Ursaluna is going to be able to stop this Meowscarada. And we see the power of that Stellar Terra type. You know, we've seen it a lot on these Focus Sash Pokemon, able to boost whatever attack you need. You know, Meowscarada is probably not going to survive more than 2 swings anyway, so no need for a defensive Terra type. And that extra damage and that knockoff could make all the difference in this match.
We see another terastallization from the Ursaluna on the opposing side of the field. Maybe just trying to match the sparkles. Another substitute as well. I think Jeremy's just having a little fun here with this end game, as 1 more turn of burn damage will be enough to pick up the KO on that Pokemon. And I do want to also take a moment while we're waiting for this game to resolve. This Meowscarada is not running Protean. It's running Overgrow. So yes, the Dark-type boosted terastallization attack did a lot of damage. There could have been more boosts in play. They're not, but there could have been. And I think that's a mastery that Vijay has shown, using his favorite partner Pokemon yet again, but this time moving on undefeated here in Baltimore after 5 rounds of Swiss.
Hey, not a team anybody expected to see it 5-0, but we see why it got there. Really impressive set there. Jeremy almost clawing that one back. I think that was a very heroic comeback attempt, but in the end, just the damage that these Pokemon were able to deal, especially that Tauros, just absolutely looking like a monster in that set. And, you know, sometimes there's games like